Hello. Welcome, friends. It's Sunday, March the 8th, and we have a special guest on the Green Bee live March flower extravaganza, I guess. This is Eleanor. You've seen her in the videos before. She's a lot. She loves hanging out in the seed room with me, and she's a bit of a suck. So we're just going to be super cute right now with the cat. Fix you guys a little bit. There we go, so you can see her. While we enjoying the live stream. We're down in the seating room again today, which is just easy to do it down here because it's a little quieter. But you'll probably hear her purring a little bit because she's going to be a bit of a suck while we do some of this. So I do have a little bit of a structure for the live. Oh, okay, I guess we're now migrating. All right, so we're going to be having the cat hang out with us today, I guess. She might also move the laptop around because she thinks that it should be a part of the petting committee. Okay. Hi. Yeah, all right, I think we're done now. Thank you. Okay, so welcome to our March check-in for Green Bee. If you are joining us, let me know. Oh, it's always the other way on my screen. But anyways, let me know in the comments. Love to know who's joining us, where you're from. And welcome. It's March now. Thank goodness we made it through January and February, which was just really cold. It's finally starting to warm up. We are expecting like plus 11, 12, 14, 15 degrees Celsius this week, which means hopefully running full right into spring. It's been so cold that I went back and looked at, you might hear my husband walking around upstairs too. It's been so cold that I went back and looked at some of our like seeding and planting from 2024, and I realized we're about 3 weeks behind, simply because it wasn't warm enough in the greenhouses to start planting some of the things that we need outside, because even though our greenhouse is like partially heated, it's heated to like just above zero kind of heated, and not like a 10 to 12 degrees Celsius overnight kind of heated. And with like minus 24 plus wind chill nights in Ontario in a lot of February, it was frigid, man. So I'm very excited for warm temperatures because we have a lot of things to cover this upcoming week. I'm gonna probably be putting out a few YouTube videos like over the course of this upcoming week because so many exciting things are happening in March. We have tulips that are starting to color up in the greenhouse. We have a vole living in the greenhouse, so that was a fun discovery this week. And I have stock that's ready to go in and larkspur that's ready to go in, and we have some very energetic lupins, which I'll talk about in this live as well, and a whole video planned on the lupins, so I'm really excited about that. But anyways, of course, if you're enjoying this and, you know, we're going to do the whole like and subscribe, because there's a lot of new faces here, and I'm excited to see that we've got so many new faces on the channel. It's been fun, I think, having the energy and the capacity to do a lot more like videos so far this year. 2024 I talked about a little bit in the last video. It's just Joseph was in and out of the hospital quite a bit in like later in the fall last year. We had spent, I think, probably 4 overnight stays there between like September and there's cat hair flying everywhere, between like September and like January of this year, because he'd had pneumonia and he'd had the flu, and then he'd also been really sick last April. Which I had shown kind of in a YouTube video as well. So like I just didn't have the energy to do a lot of lives and YouTube videos last year. So I'm excited and I'm happy to be back into it this year. Yay! I wanted to first introduce myself for those of you who are new. Hi, I'm Brittany. I am one of the founders behind Green Bee Floral Co. I am primarily the creative mastermind behind our flower business, but we do this kind of in conjunction with my husband, and we have staff that work for the business as well. And this year, my goal is really to be here, to show up, and to be excited for flowers. So let's go. I wanted to start talking a little bit. We've got a lot to cover in today's live. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about spring flowers, perennials, the pros and cons of some of what we're growing. Did the feverfew survive? Because I know we're all invested in that. As well, I wanted to talk a little bit about I think the Canadian flower farming, at least in my area, response to the tariff situation and kind of how that is potentially going to affect our markets here, which I think is an important conversation to have. If you've been, following along or know, anything about me personally or have followed our Instagram, you'll know that I have a degree in English history and philosophy, and so politics, history, how it all weaves together is very intellectually interesting for me. But also kind of the crossover between how, politics and policy react and kind of inform decisions that we culturally make, I think is really important, and it's very interesting to me. And I don't think it's something that we can just hands off and not take a stance on anything, because part of this greater community that we are invested in is the earth and ecology, and leaving hopefully the world a better place for our children. And I think that's a pretty foundational part, and what drives a lot of flower farmers into this beauty is the fact that we are leaving something behind that is more beautiful than we started. And so I think that's pretty cool. But that also means that just some of the changes that have happened within the United States and the effects that it's had on our own Canadian economy and projections, and just this constant back and forth, we are already starting to see some of those shifts happen. So I want to talk a little bit about that later in the video. And then I also wanted to cover changes to our trends and changes in farmers markets, because I think that is a really necessary conversation to have. And I think there's a lot of things that need to be touched on with regards to how the change in how people are spending their money, and whether or not farmers markets, at least where I am, are the same as where they were when they started. Spoiler alert, they're not, but I'm going to get into some of that a little bit later as well. But I wanted to start with spring flowers. And I wanted to start with spring flowers because obviously that's the thing that we're most excited for. And as I had mentioned already, we are in a position this year where everything is behind. We do not have our back home little square greenhouse heated or going this year. One of my original plans was to move all of the tulip crops. Also, Elle's playing, so you might hear her. Move all of the tulip crops, the spring crops, over to the old drive plot, because that is where the main flower farm is, right? And so the thing with that is that in doing so, it freed up a lot of space for us to be able to do a lot more outdoor seating here on our home property, which, if we live in town, we do not live in the same place that we farm. And so my seed room is in my basement. But as we start to get into the heart of spring, being able to move some of those tasks into more manageable places was important for me. So we moved all of the tulip bulbs into the crates with the intention of putting them in the farm's heated greenhouse. And when I'm talking about the farm's heated greenhouse, I mean the giant greenhouse that is from the homeowners. But due to just a whole host of things, Joseph's health, personal issues that were going on, just slow business season, staff changeovers, and a whole bunch of things, we opted just to bring our crates of tulips back into the hoop house, kind of the way we did it last year. But because it's been so cold, they're actually a month behind where they were last year. I went back and pulled up footage from 2024, and I believe like February 27th or something was the first day that we were able to harvest tulips here in Ontario out of our greenhouse, our little like backyard square greenhouse. And the biggest change essentially is that there's no way we could have heated that without having all those bulbs like just completely freeze, right? We wouldn't have gotten anything to bloom even there. And so moving them into like the farm greenhouse was still definitely the best option. But in doing that and laying those crates down, we inadvertently invited a mole slash vole into the greenhouse. And I'm gonna post some footage of that in the next video that we do because it's quite funny. Um, it's got these, like, very shallow, tiny little, like, hole like, tunnels that it's made underneath of the tulip crates. And we pulled a whole bunch of them up this past week because snapdragons and things like more uh, ranunculus corms and things like that are starting to go into the greenhouse, and there's all these, like, little tunnels through. And it's not that he's not cute, but he definitely got into some of the tulip crates. And I will say that of all of the possible things that it could have eaten, my 30-cent tulip bulbs are far less of a concern than my, like, $3 ranunculus, like, clone ranunculus corms, right? So I mean, I take that as a win because it could have been so much worse. And apparently he's been living there for, like, most of the winter. It just that we really noticed him, this week when we had to pull stuff back and plant, and all of a sudden, there was a little vole. Scared one of the staff members, that was great. Um, so yeah, so, like, we are, like, into planting season now. This upcoming week, our farm team this year, went out so my husband, Jasmine, and, Auntie, because she's peppers the videos sometimes, went out and finished greenhouse number 2, which is the really, really long, frame that has been in a few of the videos earlier this year. So that's finally done. They're finishing kind of, like, batting down the sides, and, that is going to have larkspur, stock, nigella, orlea, more ranunculus, and butterfly ranunculus. And I do want to set a section of that aside to hopefully also perennialize, maybe trial out perennializing Lysianthus essentially. So that's kind of the goal this week with the warm weather. I really have to get the stalk in the ground. It's like this tall right now, and it needs to tomorrow's still gonna be cold. Monday, it's gonna be like 9 degrees again, and it's gonna be cloudy, so it's a good day to bring a lot of those starts, excuse me, over to the farm, so that they can start living their best greenhouse life. And this year, one of the biggest changes we've made in how we're growing certain things is I am no longer going to be putting larkspur outside. I have never had a huge amount of success with throwing larkspur into the snow in the fall, like early winter, and letting it germinate that way. It's just where it is. It's just the farm. I promise it's not like a seed problem. It's just the farm. So what I have found has been working for us is that pre-sprouting them into our fridge this year into like a damp paper towel, planting them into the trays once they've sprouted. So we don't soil block Lysianthus this or not Lysianthus larkspur this year. I'm really changing what I'm soil blocking and how I'm soil blocking as well. But anyways, the Lysianthus larkspur. Talk, Brittany. It is like. Whew, uh, moving the larkspur, like I'm looking right at it. I can see it from where I'm sitting here. Moving the larkspur directly from like the damp paper towel into the like seed cell trays definitely gave us a much better germination rate this year. And I'm only growing white and purple. Because I know that with these, it'll be used in our June instead of our July subscriptions. And I want to have colors that I know are gonna match some of the, like, magenta peony that I have. Like I've got a ton of the Carl Rosenbergs or whatever they're called planted in the field, and those tend to be the ones that the peony that are ready for our June flower subscriptions. So when I'm planting this year, I'm actually thinking about what can go in. That said, the plan hopefully this year is to have lupins ready to go for July. Where they are headed on the farm this year is the front corner when you first come in, which is where we had Amy and the larkspur planted in the past. And dill, I think, was there as well. So that'll be fun to weed out this year. Silly decisions. But it has shade, morning shade on that corner, and then really, really good afternoon sun. And it gets a lot of water. And I know lupins really, really, really like water. But they're very fast growing. This guy's 5 weeks old. Like we can't pot them up they really, really need to go in the ground in like 2.5 weeks because I have 200 of these. 200. I thought it was a smart idea to do 200, and I think there's like 220 lupins. So like fill a whole row, right? And then honestly, we're probably going to fill 2 because these are going to keep expanding. And so those 2 rows when you come in are going to be lupins because that's where we have them anyways to start. But they're so big already. And I don't want them in my basement any longer. So I'm really hoping that we can also take these out with us to the greenhouse this week and get them in the ground before the end of March. I think we're done now with deep freezes. The long range forecast is starting to look like things are going to hover around 5 to 11 degrees Celsius where my little tiny microclimate is. So hopefully as the soil starts to like thaw out, we'll be able to get these in because they need to get out of my basement. They are huge. I did not realize that they grow so fast because I've never ever had good luck with lupins. Last year or the year before, we had a bunch of tiny little sprouts that were done in like not even soil blocks, but like those little like foam veggie trays that the homeowners that we grow at. She had extras and she's like, oh, like I grew these and I didn't plant them all. Here, have some. And out of like the 12 that we had, like maybe 3 survived, and they're beautiful. It's part of the reason why I love them. But now they're this big, which was about the size of the ones that like these are bigger already than the size of the ones that we put in. Like not this past year, but the year before, and then had moved. And I think it's going to be a good lupin year. My hope is that we're able to get like 30 blooms off of them this year. I know that you're not supposed to necessarily cut perennials the first year, and that's fine. But like, I would like to get 30 blooms total out of my 200 plants of lupins, and I think that would be great. So that's the lupins. Now, the next thing I wanted to touch on was to answer one of the questions that came in for the live. And so this question is from Mimlau J. Asked, is it worth growing the more expensive Italian ranunculus versus the Dutch or the California ones? Yes. For us personally, it is for a couple different reasons. We have basically 2 main suppliers outside of like Ball, if you're able to get ranunculus through Ball in Canada. I don't bring a lot of like the Picotti style ranunculus in. We source our ranunculus now through Unicorn Blooms, which gives us the Italian ranunculus because as a flower farm florist combo, the cheaper Dutch or California ranunculus do not give me the size heads that I need for the larger scale design work. There's a pretty substantial difference in bloom size from like the Amandine varieties, which you can get from Venort, versus the Clone and Elegance series that we get from Unicorn Blooms, right? And I will say, like, even then, not all of the Elegance series blooms can hear the cat. Not all of the Elegance series blooms are created equal. So like we have white Blanco ranunculus that are like they're absolutely massive. Like the head sizes are comparable to the Cloney Hanois, versus like some of the like Bianco striatos, which are like the white ones with the purple like exteriors on them. Um, those ones tend to have smaller heads, but they're still bigger than the amandine varieties, which we grew the first 2 years we were growing ranunculus, right? So I think that question is kind of a twofold answer. Where the first half of that, like the answer to that question is, what are you growing your ranunculus for, right? For us personally, I am selling them to florists and I am using them in my own store. And so to not have the top of the line series of ranunculus, and I would group anemones in here too, is not a smart business decision for me. So even though I'm spending $3 on like a Cloney Hanoi like ranunculus, I am reselling those stems to myself for like $4 wholesale and then marking them up to go in the weddings. Similarly, I'm charging florists $4.50 to $4.75 a stem, even during like full season, because for us to purchase ranunculus from our wholesaler, they cost $5.50 a stem for Cloney series ranunculus right now. Like I just used some absolutely beautiful, like bright hot pink ranunculus that were Cloney series, in like a bouquet that went out this week, and $5.50 a stem, people. Like these are the Virgil greenhouse ranunculus that are like being brought from Virgil, like from the Ontario flower growers market to the wholesalers and then coming to us, because realistically for myself, I'm not driving to Toronto to go get those. So like that's worthwhile to me. But then I'm reselling my Cloney ranunculus and my elegance ranunculus to the like local florists as well when my stuff is starting to come on. So I'm easily making that money back as like for in the corm that I'm spending, right? I can't get the same price. Like I could maybe get $1 to $2 a stem wholesale for the amandine series, because I don't find that they grow as tall. We have a very quickly warming up spring here. And so I'm not going to be wasting greenhouse space and time on ranunculus that aren't going to get to the height that I need them to be to sell them well and to use them well. And also they're very basic lines, right? The downside to some of the Italian ranunculus corms is that they have to be destroyed year after year. And so the Cloney series in particular, you have to destroy those corms. You can't replant them. So when I order, I typically, like I talked about this before, hold some back for the fall so that I can do my fall planting. And then we usually get more like in the summer, because my ranunculus that I have ordered last year are already in the ground for this spring. The elegance series, you can save those. I'm very interested this year to figure out if I can collect ranunculus seed. I'm not sure how to do that yet. And I always go into my years with like very big intentions and then forget to do things. So yes, for me personally, it is definitely worth it to invest in the higher end ranunculus because I know my clientele. And it might be different for different farmers depending on where you are, and like what your purpose for growing the ranunculus is. If you're growing them for your own entertainment, if you're just doing like little jars off of your property, the Italian ranunculus may not be what you need. You may actually have a better profit margin. You may actually have better success with the amandines. I just know that for us personally, after growing both varieties, it is much more worth it. Like the Italian ranunculus is the nicest ranunculus I have ever seen. It has got some of the nicest blooms I've ever seen. And while all ranunculus is beautiful because it just is naturally a very stunning flower, I'm never going to get, like, we had 16-inch height off of our Bianco series elegance Italian ranunculus last spring in the greenhouse versus the same white ranunculus giving me like maybe 6 to 8 inch stems at their like greatest, right? So that's really something to consider. They are more expensive. But I think in the long run, depending on your goals, that yes, they definitely are worth it. Like, if you guys have questions too about the ranunculus, what I didn't do this year for ranunculus is a pre-sprout video because there's more of those on the page. You just have to go back and look. But if you have any questions about any of those types of spring flowers, drop them in the comments there, or the chat, which is sadly underused during our lives. I wish more people would like engage in conversation. I do keep the subscribers only mode on. So if you are joining us, you need to subscribe for at least 5 minutes so that you can like participate in the chat. But again, I'd love to know who's here, where you're from, all that jazz. It's fun to like talk with all the people who follow us. I've been loving to reacting and like responding to all of your comments on our videos. It's been so fun for me to be doing this again this year, and I feel just so much more energized coming into 2025, which is crazy because I feel like there's just general doom and gloom over 2025. But I think that's a huge reason why we need flowers. We need to have something that's physically grounding us into the earth because it really gives us a lot of perspective. And then also, I think a lot of hope, right? So much about growing flowers is just operating on hope that the season will go well. I've got use my lupins as an example. 220 lupins really are just an exercise in faith and hope, where I've done all I can do behind the scenes, and I have to just pray that we don't have anything huge that rips them out this year because we're in the very baby parts of 2025, and there is so much left of this whole growing year. Like, we're just getting started. So like, could be completely different in a couple weeks. One thing I am grateful for though with spring is we have a lack of bunnies on our farm, which I'm very happy about. The homeowners have a dog, which really helps, but we do have snapping turtles. Um, and moles apparently this year, but which we knew there was moles in the field. But like, we have snapping turtles at the farm, which is always a bit of a jump scare when you are like pulling fabric back in the spring to check on root systems, and all of a sudden there's like baby snapping turtles there, and you're like, "Oh, okay, guess I'm just gonna go somewhere else for a while." Yeah, there's a creek, depending on where you're from, that runs through the property, and there are some turtles that live in that creek, so we don't venture down there because snapping turtles are vicious, and we do not need that sort of injury on our farm. So that's always fun. We also have a lot of toads, but I mean, who doesn't? Um, yeah, yeah. So the real burning question now is, did the feverfew survive? The answer to that question is, for the most part, yes. Haha. I could not believe it when we went and looked at to the farm in the mud pit, because we are actively in what we call mud season right now. Well, actually, this past week would have been false spring in Ontario, Canada, with our like we had one day it was like 10 degrees and all the snow melted and it was great. And then everything froze over, which we refer to as like third winter. And we are entering what we call mud season this week, where all this mass amounts of snow starts to melt, and everything gets stuck. And I'm pretty sure Nick's truck has gotten stuck a couple times at the farm this week, because it's just a mud hole there right now. I'm very much looking forward to a couple really nice warm days this week, just so that the earth can suck all the water back down into it, so that we can drive around the farm again and start laying some of the infrastructure that we need to lay. Um, I foolishly went out in my nice white running shoes that I wear to work, which are now have like this much mud caked to them, which is fine. Just because I had to check the feverfew. The second I could see whether or not it survived, I needed to know. And there is green, there is life. which I'm very excited about. I could not believe it. I thought for sure these plants were done for when we hit like minus 24 degrees weather in February. And I think that the insane amounts of snow that we also had did its job in insulating the plants and the roots. I don't think all of them made it. I'm pretty sure some of the new varieties. Hello. Oh, Kerwood. Nice. That's very close. Um, and yeah, I know so not all of them made it. I think the little like yellow palm varieties that look like tiny little yellow mums, which I love, but they definitely didn't all survive because of where they're located on the farm, which involves flooding. So the anybody that did survive is going to get moved into the other rows. But I plan to take cuttings from my feverfew hopefully this week and get them kind of started in the greenhouse because one of the nice things about having our retail location is that I can now start to sell like actual live plants that we are like growing and propagating on our own farm, right? I will probably sell a handful of the lupins. And if you are like in Ontario, if you're in Canada and you're watching this, I'm slowly starting to load dahlias up on our website. So there are dahlia tubers for sale this year. And normally around the 1st of May, we just bring in the extras into the store and let people mix and match bags for a certain amount of money because I always have a ton of like Too Sexy, which is one of my favorite red dahlias. It's this beautiful formal decorative red dahlia. And I think it's really underloved. It's such a good one for Thanksgiving because it's got a little bit of an orange tinge to it. So it's almost like a coppery red. It's really beautiful. But when it starts to bloom, it looks like red lipstick, which is fun. Um, Also, hello, Ontario Gardener. Thank you. I love just thank you for the support over like the last month. I'm so glad you're enjoying the design videos. And Annie, hi. Do you guys still have that much snow in Montreal? Oh, I couldn't do it. I visited Montreal once. My cousin lived and worked at McGill. So I was really lucky. I got to go visit Montreal in the winter in February for like they had the university journalism awards hosted in Montreal. Like this was probably 13 years ago now, if not more. How old am I? It was a long time ago. It had to have been like 2006, which I guess is more than 13 years ago. Where did the time go? Anyways, um, and yeah, you guys are cold. Goodness gracious, it's cold there. Like, even the underground was cold, and I was like, "I don't wanna do this. I would like to go back to warm Ontario," and, like, our trains were delayed that year, which was really weird, and we got back to Hamilton because that's where I lived, where we had actively had Snowmageddon the same year. We got back to, this is just, like, a side bit. We had gone to this, like, Canadian University press conference. It was great, and, like, my cousin gave me, like, an entire tour of the city, and we walked the whole thing, and I'm like a wimp from Ontario, so that was way too much walking for one person to do. Um, Montreal's a beautiful city. I think it's had I not married my husband and become this, whatever this is that I'm doing, I probably would have curled up in like an old apartment, overpriced apartment in Montreal and read and wrote and like become one of those like recluse academics who like take their morning coffee at like a cool bistro, which was genuinely my favorite part of living in Kitchener Waterloo as well. I've lived like all over the place, by the way. I've lived originally from like where we are here in Strathroy, which is about 30 minutes away from London. um, I did my undergrad in Hamilton. I did my master's out in British Columbia, so lived very close to Vancouver for a year. Spent a gap year in Kitchener-Waterloo. I've visited a whole bunch of cities we've done like East Coast, I've done West Coast. Like we live in a phenomenally beautiful country. I'm very lucky that I live where I do because Southwestern Ontario really does have some of the best growing land. I think in with some of the longest seasons because of how far south we are. Where I love being Canadian. Hi, New Jersey. It's nice to see you, Jessica. Welcome. Oh, that's very kind. Thank you so much, Ontario Gardener. Your support really, and just so you guys know as well, if any supers that you guys and like super thanks and all of those things, not that I'm even like I don't hope for these things at all, but these sorts of money we are putting into our son's like um accounts for things like house expansions that we have to do simply for like mobility purposes later. And also hi from Collingwood, UK. I've also been to Blue Mountain. So here we go. Loving the representation from all over Canada right now. Feverfew's fun. Anyways, yeah, it survived. I was really impressed. We'll get back to that. Anyways, quick note back on the thanks because I get really excited and um we we are taking that and sticking it in our son's GoFundMe because one of the things I've talked about in our videos before is the fact that we have a very large renovation that needs to happen on our home. Joseph is 8 now, and he's large, and we need to be able to put tracks through the home in order for him to be able to, do things like take baths and get out of bed in the morning because he's too heavy for us to lift, like very encroaching. We also need a wheelchair accessible vehicle for him, which needs to be very specifically modified. And these are not cheap things. It's not like a $20,000 vehicle. It's like an $80,000 vehicle that has to be completely customized to him. And we live in a tiny bungalow. Like his wheelchair doesn't really fit down our hall. It's very difficult to get him in and out of our bathtub anymore. And while there is like some government funding for this, which we're very thankful for, it's a one-time deal. And it's about $15,000. And we need a lot more than that in order to do what he needs, so that he can also thrive and so that we don't hurt ourselves, right? Because that's the other side, I think, of having a special needs child that you don't really think about is as they get older is the just sheer amount of like I physically can't lift him up. I can take him down because gravity works in my favor, but I can't lift him out of bed and like bring him place. I can't lift him into his chair for him to eat. I have to like Nick has to be around for that, or he's a two-person lift where we both have to be doing it, or I need somebody to help. Um, and because we don't have lifts through the home, we don't qualify for like in-home PSW support yet because they're not allowed to lift on their own. It's a whole thing. Um, and it just because of the way the Ontario housing market is right now, and because of where we live, which is around the corner from his school and 25 minutes away from Sick Kids Hospital, it's not in our best interests either to um, find a new housing location. Like nothing is built to be accessible really. So we need entirely new entrances into our house, about a 10-foot expansion into the back of the house where we can basically create an accessibility wing with a track that'll run from like his bedroom into his own bathroom into like the kitchen so that we can, continue to feed him. Child needs to eat. He is a growing boy. But also just like a ways to like places to put his equipment because he has a standing frame and he has a bike and he has eventually hopefully a walking frame. We're getting close to that too, which is really exciting. And then, we do also have night nursing for him, which I've talked about in videos before, which is really wonderful. But it's also to the point now where these modifications need to start happening because they can't lift him either. So like in the morning, like my husband goes, I stay up late. So if they need assistance when they come in, somebody's up. Nick gets up early in the morning when their shift is over so that he can go and assist with like getting Joseph out of bed because Nick is the only person who can still lift him without hurting himself. And that's if Joseph keeps his like weight balanced, which he's getting better at doing. But anyways, so I just wanted to say thank you because that's part of what those little super thanks go to help. I'm really, really grateful for that. It's a huge reason why I'm getting really active onto our YouTube again because I want to find additional ways to be able to support those costs. Interest rates are still high, even though they're coming down, and renos are expensive. And as I expect this year, they're about to get more expensive because of the next thing we're going to talk about, which is the tariffs. That was quite the segue. Hey, okay. The reason I'm doing it in this order is because I want to touch on markets, I think, last, because I think we need to have a conversation about the tariffs before we can talk about the shifts in farmers markets and selling flowers. So, as many Canadians watching this have I can probably empathize with, one of the things that our southern neighbors, have done a very good job of, regardless of where I think, stand on the political spectrum, is they've managed to make Canadians very proud and patriotic to be Canadians, which is about the only time that ever happens is during the Winter Olympics, so great job. Um, this week has been a lot of back and forth, between, like, will there be tariffs, will there not be tariffs? And, um, I wanted to actually sit and have this conversation, because I haven't seen any Canadian content creators talk about this yet. And I think I'm in a bit of a unique position to talk about it because we are both retail floral and flower farm. So I'm going to preface this by saying that I don't think we are going to see the necessary impacts of whatever happens with the instability around US tariffing, because that's really what it is, in the actual flower farming world, outside of probably the price of materials, to, like, build things like our greenhouses and the steel frames and all of that kind of stuff because of how manufacturing works. I don't think we're gonna see huge changes in things like seed pricing, bulb pricing, depending on where you source things from until like, next growing season, right? A lot of growers are really, I think, lucky insofar as the fact that, myself included, made very important decisions to get their seed orders into various seed providers, before Trump took office. Because of the uncertainty around, I think, just, yeah, like, what was coming down the line, right? We already knew he'd been talking about this, like, well before, he came in, and we didn't know how that was gonna affect things like Canadian dollar, and even, like, bringing seeds into Canada from places like Johnny's, right? And I wanna preface this by saying that we love wanting to support Canadian businesses first, but also bear in mind that lack of support for certain industries in America, small family businesses, because essentially at the end of the day, the flower farming world is still very much, and, like, the seed worlds, right, is still very much like a microcosm in the greater economy. And these are small family businesses, whether it's Vessie's, William Dam, whether it's Johnny's, whether it's Ball, like, these are not giant corporations that are, like, making billions and billions of dollars, and, like, they employ local people. They're doing a ton of research around, like, biodiversity and new plants, and I think we have to balance our anger towards what's happening while also understanding that at the end of the day, there are people. Um, there are people that are still on the other end of this, and I I struggle, because I love ordering from Johnny's. I think that Johnny's has some of the most incredible seeds, and new varieties. They've really, like, even with the absence of florets, like, line of zinnias this year, Johnny's stepped up and they have a blush variety of zinnia that they released, this year. They've got some of the best, most interesting snapdragon varieties, and they ship early and on time, right? Which I think, as a Canadian, has been really difficult for me to want to continue to get, like, my early seeds from William Dam seeds, which again I love. We're like an hour and 40 minutes away from their retail location. Like, I went, we're gonna judge me for a second. My undergrad is from Redeemer in Ancaster. So I did that whole funnel first. And I, like, literally went to university, like, down the road from from William Dam. My issue is that the Canadian seed market is so far behind, I think, what we have off, like, what is being offered through the States, and so I don't know that I'm going to completely cut off my Johnny's order either, because one, I grow Lysianthus from seed. So I'm not going to get my early spring varieties from William Dam, and I'm not paying Vessie's pricing for varieties of stuff that I want because they're not geared towards flower farmers who are buying thousands of seeds, right? Like we have 33,000 Lysianthus seeds circulating around my house right now. And yeah, it's hard because those really cool and interesting varieties that I want are there. But the other side of it, I think, is that the education factor that comes with, a seed company like Johnny's, maybe and I hope this isn't my journey and this isn't something that I necessarily want to take on, but perhaps somewhere down the line, it will open up conversations on investing into ecological study around flower farming in Canada. I think Canada's uniquely positioned to be able to grow um, different varieties and develop different varieties of flowers really well. Um, and I don't won't order necessarily like my Bennery Giant zinnias from Johnny's because to be honest, I can just get those from William Dam. Um, but I can't get everything that I want from William Dam, and so my hand is a little bit forced that way. Um, and it's tough with tariffs too, the tariff situation as well, because there are certain industries that are not as affected as others. Um, and a lot of it right now is just the American government is just like puffing their skin out or like their chests out, and there's no real decisions being made one or the other. And I think that that's part of the problem, right? Is there's a lot of us that are sitting here and watching that go on right now, and we're not really sure what to make of it because we have no way of knowing how it's going to affect our business going forward, right? There was a lot of that anticipation around the start of COVID as well. And I don't know if YouTube gets mad if we like talk about the pandemic, but I I'm seeing a lot of the same like banding around our communities now that has been that happened at the start of COVID. And so I think that first and foremost, firstly, what I've noticed instantly this week is my floral wholesaler started putting country of origin beside every single flower that they offer for ordering, which has helped to make some really like important decisions, right? And we saw this already, I think, before my last live as well, is that the Canadian government went over the United States and developed, trade deals specifically with Colombia and Ecuador before Valentine's Day, so that the like rose imports wouldn't, like the rose and carnation imports wouldn't necessarily be affected, right? So like that's a big thing. We have different trade deals happening with different countries. There's been a lot that's been going on behind the scenes, but I think with regards to florists in particular, that was a big part of the puzzle that kind of allowed everybody to have a sigh of relief. What I am already seeing an increase on price is eucalyptus has gone up about 50 cents because it goes by weight, so it's like an extra $2 a bundle now. Salal and leatherleaf both come from, which is very, very common greenery used in retail floristry. Those are US grown. And those aren't necessarily things that they can grow in Colombia and Ecuador because they're grown on the West Coast, so like California. So that's interesting as well to take into account. But like I don't think we're going to see the full extent of a lot of this for another year, because realistically we don't yet know how it's going to affect the price of steel rods for greenhouses themselves, landscape fabric, because even though we can support Canadian like distributors, they're not actually the ones making these items, right? And so there's still that added element of like how is the the inconsistencies through the global market and all of this going to play into people's just ability to purchase what they need to purchase to run their farms. And then the second part of that conversation really is going to come to how is it going to affect everybody's day-to-day pocketbooks, right? Which is where I really liken what we're seeing right now around like very much supporting our communities to what happened at the beginning of COVID, right? We started growing flowers, and this is kind of where our backstory is a little bit important here. We started growing flowers in 2019. We had already been experimenting with things like zinnias and snapdragons and sunflowers and, the very basic things that everybody starts with. I had some dahlias. We were selling like little $10 bundles at our local farmers market long before the pandemic hit. And going into 2020, in 2019, the fall of 2019, we planted about 500 tulips in our backyard here on our like tiny little home plot in Southwestern Ontario. And when everything shut down and was still shut down into Mother's Day, we had flowers. And I was literally picking everything I could from like our own backyard, lilacs that were coming on at my mother-in-law's, her tulips and daffodils, like all of that kind of stuff, right? And the community really came around and started to like band around a lot of our small businesses during that time, and changes and modifications were made in order to like help, right? And I'm seeing a lot of that happen again. We're definitely seeing an uptick, I think, even in the store, of people searching specifically for Canadian grown flowers, regardless of where they're coming from in Canada. We just happen to be in a region where there's a ton of really important and really large growers of a lot of like very popular flowers like gerberas, ranunculus, anemones. Eleanor, sorry, gotta get the cat. Hey, thank you. We're just lucky that we have those things close. And I might have to throw a shoe at her. She's trying to get at my Lysianthus. Hi. Cats are their own. Get a COVID cat. They said it'll be fun. But anyways, so people are paying more attention to where even their flowers are coming from. And so I think that we are going to see an uptick for farmers in general, flower farmers specifically around the community and wanting to source locally again. But I also think people's desires are going to go to the farmers markets are changing. And I don't know if you guys have experienced this as well. And this is kind of where this conversation like peters into how people access what we're selling. Which is to say that like we have definitely seen a drop in sales in our farmers markets, our local farmers market, compared to 4 years ago. Um, and I think that the reason for that is because farming as a whole, due to a number of factors, climate change, age of traditional farmers, people's ability to spend money because inflation across the world because of the pandemic has been so high. Um, we're seeing sales decrease because flowers are a luxury item, right? Um, and so while I think a lot of people intentionally want to support their communities and to support their local growers, um, there are less actual food farmers at our farmers markets now. I know for where I am, our town municipality runs our farmers market essentially, but it's not a farmers market. It's branded actually as a market because it works under a special events license because we no longer have enough independent like vegetable farmers and food producers to be considered a legitimate farmers market by Canadian market standards. Um, and while yes, that potentially impacts people who are coming because you're seeing more of your like MLM vendors or like your non-handmaids, we also get a lot of community groups that come into the market. People's pocketbooks in general are have been stretched the last couple of years, and I don't know. It's hard to forecast how all of this will they, won't they put the tariffs on things that are going on right now is going to affect people's like actual ability to purchase flowers because it is technically a luxury good, right? On my end, like we have the store, so we book weddings and funerals and all of these things because at the end of the day, people still um, need flowers for those things. People still get married, people are still born, people still die, and flowers are the bookends. They really are the bookends of life, right? They are the things we pepper our entire lives with because that beauty helps like ground us into, I think, a reality that we can all be proud of. They're a way to honor people. They're a way to show people that you love them, and so flowers will always continue to exist. The need for flowers will always continue to exist, but the amount that people can spend on flowers, I think, really is changing. Um, and similarly, if I've got somebody who's going to the farmer's market and they have $50 to spend, and the veggie farmer, their prices have gone up because minimum wages have gone up and requirements into growing that tomato or that zucchini has gone up, they're going to spend the money on the food before they spend it on the flowers, right? And so I haven't quite figured out a way to help to mitigate that, or besides simply acknowledging that social media and content creation, I think, is a way for people to enjoy flowers, and creators to get, reimbursed and paid indirectly for that without actually being able to buy the flowers themselves, right? Um, and so I'm finding consumer spending habits are changing, and have changed really over the course of the last, couple months in a way that I haven't seen since the start of COVID. And that's not going to change how I run my business now, because ultimately we created Green Bee to what it looks like in this moment during a time already of economic instability, right? Like the real, toddler stage of Green Bee Floral. And I would say we're probably in we're preteens now, right? We're not quite like adults yet. I've been doing this. This is our 6th year growing, but I would say I probably hit the adult stage of my business when we get to 10 years. But I would say that because we have the benefit of having created our business and our business model in a time when there was so much uncertainty because of the pandemic, the need for local blooms and the use of local flowers in our designs, our aesthetic, how we brand and how we market ourselves is integral to my business as a whole. And I'm hoping that for a lot of farmers who are, you know, growing, hopefully long term, you're able to incorporate a lot of, that local aspect, the Canadian grown, the supporting your community part into the marketing for your flowers, because that really is, at the end of the day, people seek out community and they want community, and flowers are a really concrete way. Food and flowers are a really concrete way to support a community, um, that you can't do through Walmart or even like Giant Tiger if you're if you're Canadian and you know what the GT boutique is. Um, I just it's a hard conversation because it's so nuanced and there's so many layers to it, and I don't think that, even 5 or 6 years ago, we could have possibly fathomed that this is the position that we were in, but I also think we have to be careful to not look at it with complete despair. Um, because for many of us who did start growing flowers during the pandemic, like, we've got this. We have and should have contingencies already in our business and our gardening plan, because our primary goal is local flowers. And at the end of the day, local flowers are still going to be a more cost-effective option than like importing the same flower. Um, I have a video that I'm working on for channel members, so, and also through our Patreon. So I'm gonna preface this by saying I've been having conversations with other local flower farmers that are at various levels of the growing stages. One who is um, in like does front yard gardening, one who has about, half an acre that she plants, and us working on like a cost of goods worksheet for like annuals and like corms and tubers. So that video, if you are not a part of them, if you're not a membership part, you will be able to like purchase that in the worksheets like on our Patreon as well. So like go be a free member over there because you'll get access to all that stuff. But my goal really this year is also to help us kind of all understand that it is actually profitable if you are able to understand your cogs. It is profitable to be a flower farmer, in whatever capacity you want to do that. Um, and my goal is to really to start giving many of you the tools that you need to take your flower journey to the next step, because I've like I said, we started this during COVID. I have lived and learned the lessons from how many sunflowers can you possibly sell at a hardware store, all the way to this isn't a particularly profitable crop for me because everybody and their mother grows it around me, right? Like dahlias is a great example of that, where I am a huge reason why I am cutting so hard down on the amount and the types of dahlias that we are growing this year is because there are absolutely incredible and massive dahlia growers that are super close to me that when the season starts, it is not profitable for me to grow dahlias at all. I'm deadheading more than I'm selling strictly because there's so many of them in bloom in September. They're beautiful, they're great for the Instagram, but that's kind of for me, other than weddings, where their usefulness ends, right? It's not a long-lasting flower. My flower subscribers don't want them because 3 days later they're dead on the table. Um, so we switched a lot of that over to Lysianthus on the farm because that's a much longer lasting flower, and the cogs on them for me are the same if I'm growing them from seed, right? Versus, buying them as a flat, or, collecting unicorn tubers, because everybody wants a specific variety, which apparently right now is a water lily variety that looks like a peony when it opens. I can't remember the name of it. So if you know it's put it in at Anne or something, put it and it just, we are also kind of coming to the end of there's so many people in my area growing peony now that it's not a highly profit. Thank you, Kelgian. Kelgaian. There is not it's not a super profitable crop for us to grow peonies. You know what is profitable? The Alaskan growers who have peonies growing from March all the way till June and are exporting them to different parts of the world because of the amount of sunlight and their mild temperatures, right? Which are perfect for peonies. But when peonies come on, their seasons are so short that even with wrapping them and sticking them in the cooler and hopefully, it's not so humid so they don't mold. I'm mostly growing them for my flower subscribers, for 3 weeks in the store, and one other florist, a florist that I sell to in a town close to me. Do I have way too many peonies? Sure. That's okay. They're beautiful, right? Some of what we have is just it's there because it also makes the Instagram pretty, and when you have people who are following you for your marketing, you're more likely, to have them come in and want to buy your flowers because your farm is pretty, which ironically, peonies plants are useless to you if the peonies are still on the plant because you need to harvest them when they're so small, and, closed so that you can anyways, you guys get what you're growers, you all know what I'm talking about. Hello, are we talking Georgia, US, or, Georgia country? Please specify. Um, do you price your peonies because the varieties or colors, or do you sell them by color? Georgia, USA. Yes. Okay. I price them based on market price. Um, which again, I'm really lucky to have because I have a wholesaler who sends me a price list. So I already know usually week by week whether what varieties, because really the varieties you're going to get wholesale are going to be um, your Sarah Bernhardt. I know that Toronto's seeing your white ran your Duchess or whatever, the dark red ones, which names I can never remember, the Carl Rosenfeld, those ones, right? The traditional and the yellows, which typically for us are actually coming from Holland because they bloom sooner. It's a whole thing. Ontario's got stupid weather. But I do know there are some specialty varieties that I'm growing this year specifically because my florist friend who likes the ritzy flowers will buy, because the Claire de Lune for us to get as a florist, those are gone and sold in Toronto so fast before some of the wholesalers can even get to them, right? So those types of varieties I'm starting to collect as double or single varieties so I can eventually split them and maybe have 10 of each plant. Ooh, that's the dream. The Richie, Claire de Lune would be or Lorelei, which is like a newer variety to the market. Like the peachies, the corals, and also some of the single ones that don't have a super long base life, but they're the ones that like the very like high-end florists in Toronto want to be able to use for their like June wedding work. Those ones, right? They don't have a super long base life. They're not multi-pellet or petaled, or they have colors that are just like brand new to the market because they're not like everybody has 500 Sarah Bernhardt peonies. And so when those start coming on, like there's just a ton of them, and Ontario's like peony season is so short that it just they go fast, right? It's like I'm not gonna get the same price for my Sarah Bernhardt that I will for like a Claire Loon. Um, what's the peony root like that? I I did not pay $150 a root for those. I think I paid 50 from my wholesaler. I think if you were probably to buy them from a greenhouse, they'd be a lot more expensive. I don't use itos because they don't grow well in my climate. I think if you have a little bit more of a moderate climate, they'd do a lot better. I never know if I pronounced them properly. I had them at the farm. They died. So I might try them in my home gardens again this year, but the Ito varieties for us are just it's not something I'm selling out of the store yet, right? Like that's the thing is we have to remember when it comes to like my specific area, we are a small town filled with a lot of very old Dutch people and very old Portuguese people who love their basic gerbera daisies and carnation bouquets. And so like some of my like off peach sunflowers, like pro cut peachy is like a little too out there for some of our clientele. So we're working on more artsy style floral and also using more interesting like foliages and stuff. Um yeah, because it's really like we have to pay attention to like what we who we're selling to as well, which um itos I think work really well for like home gardeners. I haven't used them as a florist before. I've used a traditional herbaceous peony and they just grow better in my climate. So um anyways, that's hopefully that answered that questions. Pastel elegance, $95 is the cheapest. Yeah, yeah. And I looked at bringing in some of those like varieties as well, and I decided on going with ones I just like the color of, because part of my philosophy I think for 2025 is to also grow just what I like in small quantities, because I need to have those things to find the happy in what I'm doing. Um I think because I'm at the point now where I've been growing for 6 years, like, I remember the first year I was doing this, and it was like, "Oh my gosh, a marigold bloomed. It's so beautiful." And now I'm like, "Oh, the marigolds are blooming." You know what I mean? Like, some of that, like, awe is just for some of those, like, very basic flowers are just, like, not there anymore. Where, like, granted, I will tell you this because I'm very excited. I have one bride that is getting married, I think, in September. The wedding is September this year, and she specifically wants like berry toned flowers in her bouquet, so like dahlias and stuff, but she also wants orange, and she specifically requested marigold. So I now I wasn't planning on doing this, but I now have to plant the big African marigolds specifically for her. I'm gonna put like 10 plants in because I mean I really only grow marigolds for pest control, less so than putting in bouquets. We use them very rarely for bouquets because it's like cilantro. People either love them or they hate them because of the smell of the foliage, right? I will say though, I still do love a good ruffle and a zinnia. And like a good like when the dahlias start blooming, I don't think I'm ever going to get tired of just like the variegation that happens when the dahlia first opens, when like a triple ED comes out for the first time and you're like, oh, it just tickles the brain in the right way. And you're like, yes, and it's exciting. I probably will never get tired of that. The same thing with like a good Bennery giant zinnia, like when they're so big and they're like super ruffly, like down the sides, and you're like, yeah, I probably will never get tired of that feeling. But I am finding as I'm further into this journey, the actual flowers that we're growing for like for the farming purposes versus the ones that I keep because I think they're pretty are not the same, because apparently I have the type of taste where, like, I may love the unicorn dahlias soup, but, like, oh my goodness, they do not store well in my climate. Like, we have both, and I don't even think these are necessarily ritzy dahlias. I don't have Kelgian. I probably won't order Kelgian. There's a grower who's about an hour from me in Chatham who has a ton of dahlias and grows a lot of the very, like, unicorn varieties because they're specifically growing to deliver to wedding florists. I am growing for a very different type of clientele because I want our flowers to go out in, like, our everyday arrangements as well as weddings. So, like, we're focusing heavily on, like, the Boom Boom Whites and the Cornells and the, like, Triple ED because it's peach and the Linda's Baby and the Cafe au lait because you gotta have the Cafe au lait, but also surprisingly bodacious, okay? Like, that really big red dinner plate with, like, the yellow that kinda looks like a salt and or a ketchup and mustard dahlia almost, but it's, like, fuller. That is a dahlia I got from a bag from Walmart back in, like, 2019, 2018, grew it in my backyard, and it is the best dahlia tuber I could possibly have, and that stinking flower is so big, like, bigger than my head big, that it flies off of my farmer's market stand in the summer outside the shop, because it's such a big, beautiful dahlia, and I mean, I sell them for dirt cheap. I think I do, like, maybe like 4 to 5 of them in a bouquet for like maybe $10 because I just want to clear them out because we always have so many of I think I had 200 of them growing last year for no reason. Um, it's weird. And that's the thing, right? Is like your flower farmer, your farmers market retail flowers that we're using and selling are always going to be different than like my wholesale wedding flowers. Um, so like when I'm planting ranunculus for like we're trialing butterfly ranunculus this year in the greenhouse. The varieties that I ordered for those, like I have the yellow, because everybody loves a good yellow butterfly ranunculus, but those are not for that's not for my wedding clients, right? Like I have the blush and the salmon plant going in for the wedding clients. And then I also ordered red because we're gonna trial them again in November, hopefully for Christmas, right? Um, very, very different things because when you're shopping out of the store, people want those more saturated colors to put on their kitchen table versus like weddings, which tend to be a lot more like muted and elegant and plushes and pinks and peaches. And oh my goodness, blue delphinium is going to be an issue again this year. Um, and it is really interesting too as a florist to also watch what's going on in pop culture to like how that informs what brides are looking for, is really fascinating. Orchids are making a comeback, which I think is really interesting, and I believe there's an episode of Love Is Blind to blame for that, but the blues and the whites and the yellows again this year, I'm seeing, especially for a lot of my, like, à la carte wedding clients because of Bridgerton. So it'll be interesting to see what next year's like popular wedding flowers are, because it's really interesting like life or I guess art really does imitate life or the other way around. um yeah, that's kind of that. um I hope I answered the questions on peonies. It's really for like the bulk of our peony field. They're in their third or fourth year this year. We moved, so I had originally like 100 peonies planted in my backyard. I was ambitious, okay? I know now that that was silly, but anyways, we had to kick them out because I wanted more space to, grow beans. Beans, yeah. Um, so like we picked all of those up and moved them, and then I ordered roots from the Nort, which are now and they're going into their third or fourth year. So we should have a much better harvest. I think last year, of my like I don't know 750 peonies that were planted. I mean, we put in like more this year. The field got bigger. Um, I probably harvested about 300 stems off of those 500 plants because some of them didn't put buds out yet. We had a lot of issues with like heat stroke in April last year, which really did impact the buds. A lot of them actually got burned, but the foliage was fine, so the roots are fine, and they'll put fresh stuff out. I'll check them probably this week. Roses. That's very cool. Do you pinch the side buds? Yes, always. I do pinch the side buds on the varieties I know I'm gonna be harvesting from. Otherwise, I just leave them because I'm not picking from them, so I don't care. But yes, it's a task every year is to go through usually on a morning and just pinch all the side buds off. It just they do produce bigger flowers, and I find as a like at the on the florist side as well, not having those side branching peonies is like really helpful. Um, oh yeah, no, it's up to 1,500 now. Yeah. We're very lucky that the space that we have to grow in is not small. Um, and the one homeowner is really funny because she's just like, "Oh, you put more in? Okay." And we're like, "Oh, okay." And she just walks through the fields and grabs stuff and puts it on her like front porch, and we deliver a flower subscription to the grandma that lives at the same house that the cooler is at because they used to have a huge vegetable farm and that was fun. So now we have access to like a lot of that infrastructure because they are retired and they want to see it used. And yeah, it's great. Yeah, no worries. Um, I don't grow roses, so I am interested definitely to hear, other people's experiences with roses. I know that I have a flower farmer who's about 45 minutes away from me. Her temperature, her microclimate is slightly more temperate than mine because they live a little bit closer to the lake. And the river, the lake. And so she has field roses. I believe she put in a whole bunch of David Austins as well as like some other types of roses. Um, Last year, I think this is her first full summer with roses. However, she has been growing for almost 18 years. We are very lucky to have Janice because Janice is an abundance of knowledge. But I am no way, shape, or form like even remotely ready to start growing roses. Again, I would need a lot more infrastructure, I think, to do it well. And we are just on greenhouse number 2. I would like to have at least 5. I think the max amount you can have before the government gets mad at you is 10, but I have to double check that depending on property size. So if you count like R2 plus like the homeowners have 2 outside of like their house, which I do want to start using and growing things like lilies, and that's where the tulips were supposed to move. And anyways, we'll get there. I have dreams and not enough time and energy. How tall do I cut a stem? I usually go third note in. That's helpful. So I usually cut down 3 leaves. So my stems on my peonies, that's not helpful, are probably about this long, anywhere between 18 to 20 inches. And again, it depends what I'm using them for. It depends on the variety. I find that some varieties are really top heavy, like the Sarahs. So those will typically go like the 3 nodes down. The Duchess I find have better necks. So those ones typically I can go 4 and still use them in like a tall, like a tall like standing arrangement or something for a wedding. Um, yeah, I don't have a lot of access to rose lilies right now outside of like what's available from Holland. Um, and I need to talk to my friend Janice to figure out where she gets all of her lilies from. I'm very interested in Jessie over from Bear, her lily perennializing and the blooms that she's getting like from that. The problem is that for us, and I've tried to grow lilies in our home property before, I may start with just some basics in our front gardens, it is the fact that we have really bad lily beetle. Like so much so that I once I'd planted I think like 30 or something in my backyard and I was like super excited. This was like again, this was 2020. We were learning things during COVID and that's okay. But the Coreopus and the lily beetles came in and absolutely decimated the lilies before they like could even get up. Like they were this tall out of the ground and the bugs and the bunnies just like ate them right down. So I do want to try them in crates at the farm. Um, Maybe this fall into next spring to see how that goes. But I have to do more research yet on what it needs. And again, I always start my years with like a ton of great intention, and then things get really busy and stuff happens, and wedding season happens, and then I forget. So, um, Mother's Choice, Pecker. Um, I need to look up all those varieties. Again, I don't know enough about lilies. It's really, I just started even enjoying using lilies in the store because, like, when you work in floristry, like, the varieties you have available to you are like the basic orange, pink, yellow, and white Asiatics, and like, oh, the orientals, usually there's like stargazers and like a giant white oriental and like maybe a yellow and an orange as well. Like, it's very much like in color, which is fine, but I don't have a lot of access to anything outside the very basic ones. So I need to do a lot more research about what I want to grow and start a little, like, probably start a little easier. Um, because like I said, I don't have a ton of experience using lilies because they're, again, like marigolds and apparently feverfew, which is a new thing I learned, that people don't like the smell of feverfew. I find that lilies are also another one that is very, um, people are very divided on whether or not they like them. People either love lilies because they're big and beautiful and they last a really, really long time, or they really hate them because they smell like funeral homes, right? And so I personally, I do not like stargazers. I think that stargazers smell awful. But I also have the cilantro gene that makes cilantro taste like soap to me. So I'm actually interested to know whether those things are connected. Because I have a florist friend of mine who loves stargazers and loves the big fancy lilies and loves cilantro. So, like, little side note there. But I do genuinely want to learn more about them, because I think that they can be a very profitable crop. I know paying for like an oriental or a stargazer lily, which I probably is in an oriental lily anyways, like I'm paying anywhere between $3.50 to $4 a stem to purchase those wholesale, and they come in bunches of 10. So, like, versus like an Asiatic lily, which is like $2.75, excuse me, Canadian, for me to purchase. So, like, there is, again, I have to crunch some cogs there. So, like, that's, something to look at this year. My garden, like I said, lupins. Lupins was my, like, it's not even like a big purchase thing. This was just like my big little hobby thing this year, which I think is really funny. That after like all these lupins, whatever, my neighbor across the road has them. Last year it was foxglove. I was like obsessed with the foxglove, which is so bloody toxic. But anyways, we don't put it in any of the subscriptions. I only use it for wedding work, and like funeral work, because the person's already dead. You can put it in the funerals as long as they're not like going home after. So, like, foxglove is a great spike to use for casket sprays in the like spring and the early summer. And I have a lot of it because it reseeds like nobody's business, which I'm annoyed about and didn't know at the time. I see people either love lilies or they hate them. Like, I don't know where I sit on that. I'm okay with the Asiatics because they don't stink, right? Yeah, nice. See, we're all gonna be on the lupin train this year, and I'm here for it. Um, how are they doing for you, Margaret? Because, like, all of mine look like this, and they're like 5.5 weeks old. To be honest, this one probably needs water. Just like me, I also needed water. Another thing that we're adding a lot more of to the farm this year is lavender, and also taking starts from lavender so that we can sell them in the store. This spring, I'm really focusing on moving a lot of like propagated biennials, hopefully through like our market this year, because our farmers market starts usually May 2-4 weekend, sometimes a little earlier depending on the weather. And then once it's nice weather outside, I can prop the door open and put stuff like right outside the front door in our adorable little like hallmarky town. And then people will buy stuff because they're starting to get into the mood for planting like their gardens, right? The rule of thumb around Southwestern Ontario, I think generally everywhere, is to not put anything in the ground until after May 2-4 weekend. which is early this year. I'm so not excited for April and May. Okay. Easter, we love when Easter is this year. We hate that it's 3 weeks before Mother's Day. 3 weeks, 2 weeks before Mother's Day. Let me just look this up here. Yeah, we have Easter is the 18th, and then Mother's Day of April, and then Mother's Day is 3 weeks later, which is like the 11th, and then May 24 is like the following week, and normally we at least have an extra week. Um, yeah, I like so I want to create like have more stuff available essentially for people to my husband is texting me while we're doing this, saying me to show the props from last year. He wants me to physically get off of my chair to show you. All right, I guess we're going on a tour. Okay. So, as you guys don't get to see this. So this is behind me here, right? This is the rest of the grow room. So like these are my lupins. There's an unnecessary amount of them. But Nick is currently propagating lavender as well. So I'm hoping to have little bits of these. Where to get scented geranium? I have no idea. I have not been able to find seed for it. That is a question I will bring to my favorite Janice and see, because I know she grows it, but I don't know if she's purchased it like as starts and grown it from year to year. So like I do not have an answer to that question because I don't like regular geranium. We are literally just adding like snow on the euphorbia this year for the first time. Yeah, I know, right? Like we're literally just adding euphorbia for the first time. We have update on the delphinium. So this one here, the garden lavender delphinium germinated terribly. Again, that's my own fault. Should have pre-started it in the cooler. Didn't. The other one I've already potted up. They are, oh, that's the Nigella. The other ones are, oh, they're over here. These guys I potted up into bigger ones. This is the peppers. And then my first seeding succession of campanula is like, meh, but it usually is. So I'm not super duper surprised there. All of my Potomac snapdragons are up. I still have a nice moss farm, but my Lisianthus is definitely all up. And then over here is my dahlia graveyard, because I have decided that this year I am not starting or pre-sprouting dahlias. And also I'm gonna put my unicorn dahlias and like the dahlias I'm hoping to succeed and baby a little bit in my backyard, which I did 2 years ago and that worked out really well. Last year everything went out to the farm, and I really do need to do some work this year on like our back gardens, right? Because they've been sorely neglected. Both the greenhouses need fixing because the weather's been cold and we've had tons of wind and snow and everything is just like, it's not good back there. Yeah, so this is like, what else have we got? We've got my Orlea that I attempted in soil blocks for fun. I will not be doing that again. It wasn't until after I opened the seed box that I was like, oh, these are really big. And I couldn't remember whether or not we did those in soil blocks last year. So I'll be potting these guys up too this week. The second round of stock is here. So this is our second succession. The first succession of stock is down. Like, this is what I mean, right? It's like yay tall. It needs to go out. It's looking yellow. It's mad. It doesn't want to be under grow lights anymore. It's had it with its life. Lisianthus is looking good. I just did another succession of Potomac snapdragons yesterday. The asters I just seeded. They're starting to germinate. This is really weird doing this with a laptop. And this week, oh, and the eucalyptus. Our eucalyptus crop is actually looking really good this year. So this will be filling out the rest of the greenhouse there with the vole. So good times. When do I take my dahlias out of storage for the farm planting? So we will plant the dahlias out into the field when the soil's warm enough. So I like the soil temperature to be above be nice for it to be above 10 degrees. Warmer the better. Last year We got them in, I think, the week after May 24. Or did we plant them the week before? We had 2 weeks last year between May 24 weekend because it ran late, and Mother's Day, so I can't quite remember. But I typically like to go by soil temperature. If we are planting so right now we are currently in the process of like dividing the dahlias. And I, and by we, I mean mostly Ashley, has been dividing all of the dahlias. We keep them in cold storage in like the farm cooler, which is currently off but insulated. So they stay in there for the winter, and then we take them out and we usually divide them. That crate over there is my American Dawns, some of my Coralies, some of my Western Sweet Pearls. Like those are the varieties that we had propagated. Those varieties were the ones we propagated last year that were planted in the greenhouse because I wanted them to do tuber development. And then they weren't watered very well and the tubers were really thin. And so those guys, I'm basically like, if I get one tuber out of a clump, that's great. And those guys are going in my backyard this year. They're just basically rehab dahlias for my own enjoyment. I'll buy fresh tubers for 2026 on those varieties if they don't make it. But I'm very much of the opinion now that if it doesn't survive, it was not meant to survive, and that is okay. And I have to just like be okay with it, because I think when you start this flower farming journey, it is so easy to get wrapped up in like the beauty of all the varieties that everybody else is growing. And that floret book, wow, wonderful, really, really, really does. Oh, it motivates you to buy things you do not need in the dahlia world. Yeah, so we leave our tubers in cold storage. If they're going directly in the ground, we leave them in cold storage basically until planting. The only reason those ones are out and they're in the back is because I want to see if they're alive. I'm really, really, really hoping that they survived, because they're pretty shriveled, and they were shriveled when I took them out. And I'm don't want to go over there and start rummaging around in them, because it's icky. It's really not a good reason, but we're all human. Um, Lowest temperature that stock seedlings can tolerate it once planting out. So stock is it's cool annual, right? So I won't let them freeze. I probably won't let them get below 0. But they're going in a greenhouse. So that first succession is going in greenhouse 2. So as soon as the soil's warm enough, we're not going to likely see temperatures that are below freezing during the day anymore. So they'll be fine, I think, as long as the roots don't freeze. And we can always put frost cloth over them. This is my first year growing stock, so this is literally just a learning experience for me. Are we growing? Oh, are we go back to lavender there, I think is the question. Thank you. Lisa, okay. I'm going to start with there was a question about eucalyptus. I'm going to go back to that one. So eucalyptus, we grow silver dollar. No, what did I put in this year? My husband is, instead of like coming down to talk, he said death is a part of life, when he was talking about my dying dahlias. He's hilarious. I have gunny euc planted. I have baby blue eucalyptus planted, and I did put silver dollar in as well, or populus style eucalyptus, because those are the varieties I use most in the store. Those are the varieties I use most for weddings, and those are the variety, like especially baby blue is the one that people ask for their showers, because that's apparently a thing right now. And the amount of reminding people I have to do to wash the imported eucalyptus before they stick it in their shower. So if you are one of those people who is watching this and like, oh yeah, I like to do that, please make sure your imported eucalyptus is washed, because it comes, especially when it's coming from another country, they do get sprayed. You want to make sure you give it a good veggie wash soak before you stick it in your shower, because the last thing we need to do is activate the pesticides. And I don't grow ageratum. I need to. It's just one of those things that hasn't been on the list. I think I'm starting to like add certain things every year as we're cutting other things out of the farm, right? Like status got the bye-bye this year. I just don't sell enough status, and I don't need it. We have so much of it drying and have dried in our basement right now at the store that like I don't need it. What pest is bothering? No, nothing's bothering my eucalyptus. The eucalyptus seedlings are just different colors depending on what variety of eucalyptus they are. So like the undersides of the leaves, the seedlings typically are like like a red or a brown. There's no pests in my seed room. I I don't think I've ever seen a fungus gnat in here. And most of the non spider webs that you see are actually Eleanor's cat hair because she sheds like nothing else and it tends to like to sit on top of the soil. Um, then we had a question about growing English or a newer hybrid variety. Let me just speak loudly, and my husband will tell me the answer to that question. Nicholas, what variety of eucalyptus, not eucalyptus, lavender, do we have? I don't actually know. He has not told me yet. I I'm not the one who's, like, in growing the lavender, right? Like, the lavender is Nick's baby. He started it in our front yard and has been progressively propagating it and adding it to the farm in entire rows. So I just let it happen. I want it specifically so that we can harvest it and dry it for the shop this year. People like the lavender dried. I mean, I can't blame them. But it does take a little bit of time for us to like establish enough so that because I mean, lavender takes a couple years to get like really big so that you can cut it off in like chunks. This past year was really funny. My friend and I had a really good laugh about it because Nick went through and he like harvested half the lavender in the front yard and only half of it. So it looked like it had a really bad buzz cut. It's like half of it still had the blooms on it, and like the other half was like this tall out of the garden. And I chuckled. It was very funny. And like as far as pests for the eucalyptus, I don't find that the pests actually bother the eucalyptus. Even in the greenhouse, we don't see a lot of aphids on the eucalyptus. I have 500 new ladybugs coming to the farm or the week after. So we'll be starting 500 new staff members in the greenhouse to deal with the aphid issue this year. Nick says we have both types of lavender, so both English and what is the other type of lavender? Again, lavender herbs are not my thing. It's his. I have a row of like Covent Garden baby's breath beside the lavender and the feverfew. And he says it's just packs from the garden center that we've started a while ago. Spanish, thank you. I knew English and Spanish lavender. Yeah. And he's texting me to say that he did not look at the names when he bought them. He went, I like this, and pulled it off of the just he, I don't know why he doesn't come down. He said, just packs from the garden center, didn't look at the names, just said yes to lavender. That's pretty much how that's how Nick rolls with a lot of stuff. So what did we cut out of the garden, of the farm this year? We cut out status. Bye-bye, status. And what else did I cut out this year? A lot of gomphrena. I think we're growing just white and like the pastel mix of the gomphrena. And again, that's mostly just for wedding work. And what else did we cut out? I cut out the Zinderella varieties of zinnias because they do not do well where I live. It is too hot. Yeah, I get a lot of questions about that, but they're such a slow growing seedling that I would need an entire grow room just for my eucalyptus seeds. So I'm actually interested to know if I could propagate the eucalyptus and like resell them that way. But they're so slow growing. I want them in my greenhouse. I am that millennial who needs to have all of the eucalyptus. Yeah, anyways. And what else did we cut out? Yeah, Zinderella varieties, the mini varieties. I don't think I'm growing the Oklahoma zinnias this year. They're pretty, but I prefer the Queen Lime series. And my favorite of the Queen Lime series is actually the Queen Lime Peach, my personal favorite. But I do know that a lot of our customers really like the Queen Lime Reds and the Queen Lime Blushes, but I do actually find I use the Queen Lime Oranges the most. Will I be saving this For rewatch, yes, I will. Sorry, there was an extra V in that. Yes, I will definitely be saving this for rewatch. Um, I'm gonna do that with all the live streams, so you can always go back and watch it. I do not dry stock, like the flower stock. I I know it can be dried, like the flour. I don't dry it because we use it so fast. And again, like first year us growing stock, I've hung larkspur to dry, and that dries really beautifully. I haven't had as good luck with delphinium, and to be honest, every delphinium stem we grow goes out in something. Um, I Oh, what else did I cut out of the garden? The farm this year. There was a bunch of stuff that just like I was done fighting with it. Oh, perennial straw flower, gone. Not doing that anymore. But like we'll always grow regular straw flower. Oh, status. Yes, we do grow status. Honestly, I have, like I said, I've got a basement full of status at the shop. I do not need to grow it for probably another 3 years because that is how long it's gonna take me to get through that stock of status. Um, and I mean, like, every color of status. If I'm lucky, I might have some that survived the winter. We have, like, a row of status beside our thistle that just kinda keeps coming back up, but I may pull that too. Um, I would like to add echinacea, like ritzy echinaceas, to the farm, and will like just more perennials in general. I'd like to add baptisia in. Purple's really coming back, but I like baptisia as well. It's for foliages for arrangements, right? Same thing with like lupin foliage is really great for arrangements, and I'm have a very overwhelming perennial sweet pea in my backyard that has also got foliage that I will be using for a lot of spring arrangements this year. Um, I did not order more alliums this year. I'm actually not gonna cut the alliums this year because they did really poorly last spring and they just, I think, need a year to recover. Um, I'm fairly sure we lost a bunch of varieties of those. But I added more grape hyacinths because those are cool. And I don't think I planted as many regular hyacinths this year. And again, it was so hard to plan because Easter never falls in the same time of every year. Where last year, we probably had thousands of tulips that rotted out because here in Canada, pretty people are pretty much done with daffodils and tulips after Easter is over, except for like the 3 days around Mother's Day, and then otherwise they're like moved on to the next thing, which is like the ranunculus and peony, right? Um, so we basically were like, we had like thousands of tulips that just didn't get used um last year and ended up rotting out in the cooler because we couldn't move them. The florist didn't want them anymore, and that's really sad. So this year, I'm really happy that Easter falls right in line with tulip harvesting season. and and hopefully also I'll be able to move more of the specialty daffodils off to the wholesaler. Can I do a seedling tour from time to time? Sure, I would love to. And actually, this upcoming week is going to be fun because I'm hoping to, with my mud boots on, go through and take you guys through the farm and post a video at the end of the week, kind of like what survived. We should have a pretty good idea how many of the delphinium plants survived. And like I can show you the different feverfews, and like bachelor's buttons will probably be starting to like poke through again already. And there's been stuff going on in the greenhouse. More snapdragons went in this week, and yeah, there's a lot to see on the farm and like where things are going this year. And as stuff starts to come up, and there's life in the farm again, and it's such a different vibe in the spring than it is in the fall, where you're like, it's peaceful and like you just are so thankful for like the rest. And then in the spring, you're much more energetic and you can see the new life coming up, and it's really beautiful, right? So yes, I'll do seedling tours from time to time in my tiny little seed room in my house, which will look a lot different probably in 2 weeks when these lupins are out of my room. They're going to the farm this week to be overwatered and acclimate to the night and day and colder temperatures because they're a perennial and they will be just fine. And I think that was all on my list. We got through it all. Um, Do you guys have any other questions before we end this very long live? I apologize. This was supposed to be like an hour long, and we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. And I still need to make dinner. Had chicken marinating in the fridge for probably 2 hours. Any other questions before we head off? Um, I saw a few in the back that I didn't. Oh, most of those are probably Lysianthus. I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 7 trays of Lysianthus, and like not germinated snapdragons and not germinating asters yet. Like I just put the asters in. There was one tray of like just seeded Orlea that I mean, I put that in 3 days ago, so that's not popping up yet. I will say that this year, one of my plans is to do some work on home gardens as well. So I'd like to take you along with that. I think part of planning for the future with all of the challenges that have been a part of this year is, actually growing vegetables and like home gardening and things like that again. I am very much, I I am pretty left leaning. So I'm not kind of deep into the homesteading thing, but I do also believe firmly in a lot of self-sufficiency where possible. We are going to be putting in a section of like a garden section for fruits and vegetables on the farm this year so that the staff that work for us can pick and take care of that and harvest food for their own families as well. So actually we'll be starting tomatoes this week. And we'll be planting things like cucumbers and beans and all of that kind of stuff in there. What else am I seeding this week? I've got Covent Garden Market, which has to be done. I have another succession of Nigella that has to be done. We have another succession of Bupleurum that needs to be done. I have, is this my, nope. Where is my whole section here? Leftover for 20. Oh, you know what? My laptop's on it. This is the one we need. Okay, hold on. Let me switch you. I have everything organized, right? Because this is how we do things now. Okay, we'll switch you guys over. This week, I have to seed straw flower. So March 10 is Monday. So Monday, I'm going to be seeding a bunch of different types of straw flower. We're going to be seeding probably Euphorbia this week, and Friday it looks like I need to start Gomphrena, Flamingo Feather Celosia, Pompous Plume Celosia, oh yeah, Selway Red Celosia, Shimmer Celosia, Terracotta Celosia. It's almost like I sell a lot of celosia to the wholesalers. And then we'll be starting Dusty Miller next week. So this week I've got a lot of we're starting to get into the summer annuals. And there's many trays that need to be soil blocked. And then the week after that, we get into that's got to go moved up. I also need to do the Scabiosa this week. And then we get into the Amaranth, and the regular Scabiosa, and then April's list, of course, is the zinnias and sunflowers and all of that kind of stuff as well. Cosmos, direct seeding agrostema, all that fun stuff. Yeah, we all need to make room on our shelves, eh? It's just, I feel like it's just part of the problem where we love plants so much that we just have to keep growing it all. Anyways, I think that is all for me. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I will post this for rewatch if you want to go back through and watch. And then last plug too, like I said before, the Patreon, you can join as a free member. I will be posting things for our channel members there, with including discount codes on downloading the actual videos and the sheets, worksheets and cog sheets that go with that. I will be doing a members only video coming up hopefully within the next month on cogs around your annuals and tubers and calculating how to calculate your cost of goods and that. Um, and then also like understanding different types of bouquet recipes. We'll be talking about that this year as well as a part of the channel membership. And all of those videos I will be cross posting over to the Patreon as well. So if you're wanting to become a member of either one of those, channel members will get discount codes for Patreon. Patreon will have like, different tiers of memberships, and you guys know how that works. But downloadable, useful material that hopefully is helpful for any of you that are trying to like understand your business model, like make decisions going forward, but also things like dividing your dahlias. There's a downloadable option on there, like a worksheet on there, the ebook, and I'll be doing more of those types of things as well, hopefully this year. I think I'm at the point in my flower growing, even though I'm still like really early teenager as far as like the actual growing of the flowers goes. I am at the point where I have had it happen enough times that I've had staff come in and learn from me and then leave and go do their own thing, whether maliciously or not, that I am now in a position where I'm very willing to give that information. And I've got a lot of stuff going on in the brain when it comes to flowers and how to do this well. And I think, where trends are moving into the future and how we can, develop that community and really have this conversation together, because I think there's a lot of gatekeeping in the industry. I don't want that to be the case. But it's also, part of how we support ourselves is, this channel along with the farm and the store and all of those things kind of come together. So it's like taking a university course. And I didn't think I wanted to be a teacher, but here I am. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great week. We'll touch base hopefully soon. I've got a couple videos I'm planning to film this week. And I'm going to probably start releasing those a little bit earlier in the day as well, so that you can view them kind of like during your day. I'm noticing a lot of you are on watching YouTube around 12, and far too many of you watch me on an actual television. So that's weird. Anyways, I hope all of you have a great week. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.